The stagecoach rattled across the endless Texas plain, its wheels kicking up a storm of golden dust that hung in the fading afternoon light. Inside, a young woman sat with her gloved hands clasped tight over a small, worn satchel, the only thing she owned that hadn't been taken by fate. Clara Weston had been through enough heartbreak to silence most people for life. The fire that had claimed her father's farm 2 winters ago had taken everything, her home, her books, even the old piano she'd loved as a girl. Since then, she'd drifted from one small town to another, teaching children their letters and sums in exchange for a few coins and a warm meal. But when the letter had arrived, sealed in deep red wax and stamped with the emblem of Red Rock Ranch, she'd felt a stirring of something she hadn't felt in a long time. Purpose. She was being offered steady work. A teaching position, board and lodging included. All she had to do was teach one little girl, the orphaned, niece of a wealthy rancher, and live out on the ranch for the summer. What the letter hadn't said was why no one in town wanted the job. The coach came to a jarring stop before a stretch of land so wide and wild it looked like God himself had forgotten to finish painting it. The driver tipped his hat toward the open gate where a hand-carved sign read, Red Rock Ranch. "End of the line, miss," he said. "Hope you're not afraid of silence. Ain't much out here but coyotes and ghosts." Clara forced a smile. "I'll take silence over chaos any day," the driver chuckled, helping her down. "Well, good luck, schoolmarm. The man who owns this place ain't one for chatter. Keeps to himself. But folks say he's got a temper like a storm." Clara watched the coach roll away, leaving her standing alone beneath the wide western sky. A breeze whispered through the grass, carrying the scent of sage and something wilder, like rain about to break. She adjusted her shawl, squared her shoulders, and began walking down the dirt path toward the big house in the distance. The ranch was beautiful, sprawling fields, fenced pastures, and horses that shimmered like bronze in the dying sunlight. But what drew her eyes most was the house itself, a 2-story ranch home made of red stone, its windows glinting gold. As she approached, the front door opened, and out stepped a girl of about 8, her hair dark as midnight and her eyes too old for her age. "You must be Clara," the child said, her voice quiet but sure. "Uncle said you'd come." "That's right," Clara said gently. "And you must be Emily." The girl nodded but didn't smile. "Uncle doesn't like strangers." "You shouldn't talk too much." Clara blinked, taken aback.
"Oh, I'll
remember that." Before she could say another word, the child turned and disappeared inside. Clara followed, her heart fluttering nervously. The air inside smelled of wood smoke and old leather, and something else. Presence. At the far end of the hallway, a tall shadow moved. The man who stepped into view was broad-shouldered, dressed in a dark vest and jeans that looked worn from real work. His hat cast a shadow over his face, but his eyes, when they met hers, were sharp, blue, and unflinching. "You're the new teacher," he said simply. "Yes, sir." "Clara Weston." He studied her in silence for a moment that stretched too long. Then he nodded once. "Emily's room is upstairs. You'll have the small room at the end of the hall. Supper's at 7. Don't be late." And just like that, he was gone. Clara stood there, rooted to the floor. So this was the rancher, Luke McAllister. They said he'd made his fortune years ago, buying up land others were too afraid to tame. They said he was as rich as he was reclusive, a man who'd lost his brother and sister-in-law in a stagecoach accident and hadn't smiled since. But no one had told her how beautifully dangerous he looked, or how that quiet voice could make the air around her tighten. That night over supper, Emily barely spoke. Luke said even less. The only sound was the ticking of the clock and the clink of silverware. Clara did her best to fill the silence. "Emily's handwriting is already lovely. She must have had a fine teacher before me." Luke looked up, his expression unreadable. "Her aunt taught her." Before she passed, Clara's heart tightened. "I'm sorry," he nodded, eyes dropping back to his plate. After dinner, Clara walked out onto the porch to breathe. The stars above were so bright they almost hurt to look at. Somewhere beyond the fence, a horse whinnied softly. She turned and saw him there, leaning against the porch railing, half in shadow, watching her quietly. "I didn't hear you come out," she said. "You weren't supposed to." His tone was dry, but there was no cruelty in it, just that quiet strength, the kind that came from surviving too much. Does everyone out here keep to themselves like this? She asked softly. He didn't answer right away. Out here, people keep their peace or lose it. Is that advice? A warning. Then, without another word, he tipped his hat and walked into the night. She stood there, her heart beating far too fast. Over the next few days, Clara settled into the rhythm of ranch life. Early mornings, quiet lessons with Emily, the smell of coffee and dust filling the air. But she couldn't ignore the feeling that eyes were on her. Sometimes when she was teaching, she'd look up from the porch classroom and see a lone rider in the distance watching. The sun would catch on his hat, and she'd know it was Luke, and every time their eyes met, something unspoken passed between them, something that neither dared name. One evening, when a sudden thunderstorm rolled across the plains, Clara rushed to bring in the laundry. The wind whipped her hair loose as the rain came down hard, cold and merciless. Before she could reach the last line, strong hands grabbed the sheet beside her, and there he was again, drenched, silent, his shirt clinging to his chest as lightning flashed across the sky. You'll catch your death out here, he said, voice roughened by the wind. I can handle a little rain, she shouted back. Not out here, you can't. He caught her wrist, pulling her beneath the porch roof as thunder cracked overhead. For a long moment, neither spoke. The rain poured around them like a curtain, sealing them away from the world. Clara could hear her heartbeat louder than the storm. You think I can't take care of myself? She said softly. He looked down at her, water dripping from the brim of his hat. I think you've had to for too long. She didn't know what to say to that. He turned away, but not before she saw it. A flicker of something raw and aching in his eyes. That night, long after Emily had gone to bed, Clara couldn't sleep. She heard the faint sound of a piano coming from downstairs, low, broken notes carried by the wind. She crept to the staircase and peeked through the rail. Luke was sitting at the old piano, his hands moving slowly over the keys, his head bowed. It wasn't a song, it was grief in sound, the kind that made your chest ache. She watched him for a long time, realizing that behind that hard silence lived a man who was breaking quietly every day, and she felt something she hadn't felt in years. A pull, deep and dangerous. By the time the last note faded, she was already falling, and she didn't even know the half of it, because Luke McAllister, the man who lived like a ranch hand, was hiding a truth bigger than anyone could imagine. He wasn't just the owner of Red Rock Ranch. He was one of the richest men in Texas, and the reason he lived like a poor cowboy was because he was hiding from his own name. The days that followed the storm felt different somehow. The air on the ranch held a strange tension, a quiet current that moved between Clara and Luke whenever they shared the same space. She would be helping Emily with her reading when she'd sense him nearby, his boots on the porch, his voice low as he spoke to the ranch hands, his shadow crossing the sunlight through the window. And every time, her heart did something she couldn't quite explain. But Luke had built his life around silence, and Clara respected that. Until one afternoon, she found him at the barn, bandaging his hand. Another fight with a fence post? She asked softly. He glanced up, half smiling. Post won this one. Let me help. He started to protest, but she'd already taken his hand. Big, rough, scarred from years of labor. She cleaned the wound gently, her fingers brushing his skin. You should be more careful, she murmured. Careful doesn't keep a ranch running, he said, watching her more than the wound. You ever notice how people only tell you to be careful after it's too late? She smiled faintly. Then I suppose I'll keep saying it anyway. His gaze held hers for a long, breathless moment. Clara, he said quietly, her name sounding different on his tongue. Heavier, meaningful. Why did you come here? Really? Her hand stilled. Because I needed work. Because I needed to start over, he nodded slowly. We all need that sometimes. When she finished, he flexed his hand once, then said something that caught her completely off guard. Come riding with me tomorrow morning. I'll show you the north pasture. She hesitated. Is that an order or an invitation? He gave her that faint, rare smile again. Maybe both. The next morning, the sunrise painted the land in gold. Clara mounted a horse Luke had chosen for her, a calm, chestnut mare named Daisy. Luke rode beside her, his movements easy, sure. like he belonged to the land itself. They rode for miles. The silence between them warm and full instead of empty. "This land," he said after a while, "cost me more than it gave. I bought it thinking money could fix things. It can't." She turned toward him. "You think happiness can be bought?" "I used to." Back when I still had it, she wanted to ask what he meant, but his eyes told her not to. So she said softly, "You've done something most men can't. You've built a life from dust." He looked away. "You don't know the half of it." As they rode back, they passed a stranger near the fence line, a man in a black coat, hat pulled low. He tipped his hat toward Luke and rode on without a word. Something in Luke's jaw tightened. That night, he didn't come to supper. Clara found him later in the barn, sitting in the shadows with a bottle beside him. "He came back," Luke said quietly, almost to himself. "Who?" "Calder, my brother's old business partner. He's the reason my brother's dead." Clara's breath caught. "You think he—" "I know it. He stole from the company, left my brother to take the blame. When my brother tried to confront him, that accident on the trail wasn't an accident at all." She stepped closer. "Does he know you're alive?" Luke looked up, his eyes burning blue in the dim light. "He knows I'm watching." For a moment the silence stretched until even the horses seemed to hold their breath. Then Clara reached out, her voice trembling but steady. "You don't have to fight this alone, Luke." He looked at her as if she'd said something no one ever had before. "You don't know what you're offering." "I do," she whispered. "Someone has to remind you what you're still fighting for." Something inside him broke then, not in pain, but in surrender. He caught her face in his hands, his touch rough but desperate, and kissed her like a man who'd been starving for years. It wasn't gentle, but it was real, the kind of kiss that rewrites everything you thought you knew about loneliness. When they pulled apart, her breath trembled against his lips. "You should go," he murmured. "If Calder's back, this ranch isn't safe." "I'm not running," she said fiercely. "Not from you." The next few days passed in uneasy quiet. Luke grew more guarded. He sent extra hands to patrol the fences. Clara tried to keep Emily's days normal, reading, drawing, laughter. But one evening, the girl ran into the kitchen pale as a ghost. "There's someone by the stables," she whispered. He was watching the house. Luke was already on his feet before she finished. He grabbed his rifle and stepped outside, his voice low but calm. "Stay inside. Both of you." Clara pulled Emily close, her heart pounding. Through the window, she saw movement. 2 men near the corral. Shadows against the moonlight. A shot rang out. Clara screamed. Then silence. Minutes crawled by before Luke came back in, his jaw tight, a graze of blood on his temple. "He's gone," he said. "But he'll be back. He wants something." "What?" "Not what, who?" She stared at him. "You mean Emily?" He shook his head slowly. "Me." That night, she couldn't sleep again. She went downstairs, finding him on the porch, rifle across his knees, staring into the dark. "You think he'll come back tonight?" she asked. "I know he will." "Then let me stay with you." He looked at her for a long time before nodding once. They sat together under the stars, the air humming with everything unspoken. "I lied to you," he said finally. "About who I am, I know," she said softly. "You don't talk like a rancher who's never seen the world." "I used to own half of it. McAllister Enterprises. Railroads, shipping, oil. After my brother died, I walked away. Sold everything but this ranch. Money made me enemies, Clara, so I buried the name." She took his hand. "Then what do you want now?" His answer came quiet like a confession. "Peace, and maybe you." The words hung between them like a heartbeat. Before she could respond, a sound cracked the night, the snap of a branch. Luke was on his feet in a second, rifle raised. "Get inside." She froze as 2 figures appeared at the edge of the yard, Calder and another man, guns drawn. "Evenin', McAllister," Calder called, voice cold. "Heard you've been hiding behind a pretty little teacher. Shame if she got hurt." Clara's blood turned to ice. "Leave her out of this," Luke said, stepping forward. "This is between you and me," Calder sneered. "You took everything from me when you exposed me. Now I take what's yours." The next moment exploded in chaos. A gunshot split the air. The horses screamed. Clara dove behind the porch rail as Luke fired back, the flash lighting his face, hard, determined, fearless. Then Calder lunged forward, tackling him into the mud. The rifle fell away. Fists flew, rain starting to fall again as thunder rolled across the sky. Clara grabbed the dropped revolver with shaking hands. "Luke!" she cried. He turned at the sound just as Calder reached for the other gun. She didn't think. She moved. The shot echoed through the night. When it was over, Calder lay still in the mud. Luke stared at her, at the pistol shaking in her hand, the tears in her eyes. He walked to her slowly, gently pried it from her grip and whispered, "It's over." She collapsed against him, sobbing. "I thought I'd lost you." He held her tight, his voice breaking. "Not in this lifetime." The storm passed by dawn. The sheriff came, took Calder's body, and left with a nod. When the sun rose, the world was quiet again, the kind of quiet that meant peace instead of fear. Luke found Clara in the pasture later, watching Emily feed the horses. "She'll be all right," Clara said softly. "She's stronger than she looks." "So are you," Luke said. He stepped closer, his hat in his hands. "I don't have much left to give, Clara. Just this land and what's left of me." She smiled through tears. "Then that's all I'll ever need." He reached out, brushing a strand of hair from her cheek. "You sure about that? Life with me won't be easy." "I don't want easy," she whispered. "I want you." He kissed her again then, slow, certain. The kind of kiss that seals promises not made with words but with hearts. From the porch, Emily watched them with a small smile, sunlight catching the ribbon in her hair. For the first time in years, Luke McAllister felt something he'd thought was gone forever: peace, love, and the courage to start again. And as the wind swept over Red Rock Ranch, carrying the scent of sage and rain, he realized that sometimes the greatest fortune a man could ever find wasn't gold or land. It was the woman brave enough to walk into his silence and stay.